So Paul George has recently agreed on a new 5-year, up to 226 million deal with the Clippers. Wow. Well, to start with Paul George, this was an amazing move for him because after the postseason he had recently, I don't see how he got that deal, but he is Paul George still. Like, he is being clowned all over Twitter, everywhere, but I don't think I've ever seen anybody perform the way he did and still get that money. But for the Clippers, this is a move they had to make because they traded so many assets to get Paul George, and Paul George is still an amazing player, even though a lot of people don't think that anymore because of his recent performance. So let's talk about this for a second. First, his agent deserves a raise. And really, you can't even be mad at the Clippers for actually extending Paul because if they had the same postseason as they have had the past postseason, Kawhi Leonard is leaving, Paul George is leaving, and all the assets they traded for Paul George, that's the possibly the worst situation you could actually be in if you were just to lose him. So re-signing Paul George, that was actually an amazing move for the Clippers because they can't just be bad because that's what any other team would probably do. But they traded all their first round picks, or not all of them, but the recent ones for Paul George. So there's no point of just being bad because it won't do anything. All that's going to do is make the Clippers a mediocre team. And for OKC, this was possibly the worst move for them because they have all the Clippers draft pick, meaning if Paul George and Kawhi left the team, they are going to be bad. And that would have been the best case scenario for OKC. But now the Clippers are probably going to be in the middle. Not well, in my opinion, I feel like they would if Kawhi left the team and Paul George is the only one there, they might be around probably the eighth or ninth seed in the West. I would probably assume. I would actually have to think about that a little bit more for me to actually give you the best answer. But off of the top of my head, I would probably rank them around there. And that is not what OKC wanted. If I have to give you my opinion on this contract, I would say it was worth it because Paul George, if he's playing at his best, like in 2018, if you get that Paul George, he is worth that money. In the 2018-19 season, Paul George was actually third in MVP voting, and I would love to have that person on my team. It's just Paul George has his moments where it's like, why is he even on the court? But I would definitely give him that money if I had to, especially in the case that the Clippers are in, where they might lose Kawhi. They had a chance of losing Paul George, but now he's locked up for the next 5 years, unless he asks for a trade, because that's always possible. And to actually bring up how important this move was probably for the Clippers, they gave up 5 first round picks and Shea, which he is a very young, talented player, if you didn't know. This move was really needed for the Clippers, and I can see why people might not like this move, but this is what they had to do, and you can't blame them for that. I know Paul isn't the most liked player in the NBA right now, but he has Kawhi on his team. He has other reliable pieces on his team. So hopefully he can fix the issues he had last year and especially he had an interview where he was saying that it was a whole bunch of mental issues, and I don't even blame him for that because it was stuff going on inside his own head. The bubble was not the best case scenario for all NBA players because it really messed with a lot of players mentally. And honestly, I haven't heard much about how Clippers fans actually feel about this move. I would like to know about that. But I would assume Clippers fans are happy with this move because the fact that you guys gave up so many pieces for Paul George. If Paul George walks in free agency, which he could have if he was not extended, all of that would have been out the window, especially if Kawhi was to leave the team too. So if you are a Clippers fan and you're watching this video, please leave a comment on how you actually feel about this move because I'm actually wondering. But yeah, Clippers fans, I would I would say this move saved your future because even though you guys don't have any picks for the next few years, you guys should still be competitive even if Kawhi was to leave the team because if you have Paul George as your main piece and supporting pieces, which the Clippers do have, as long as Paul George is playing up to his part and playing like how he did in 2018, you guys should be fine. I don't think you guys are going to be at the top of the Western Conference by any chance, but you guys should be a competitive team. So basically, to summarize it, Paul George is with the Clippers for the next 5 years. He has a player option for the 2024-2025 season, and Kawhi can still leave if he chooses to, if he doesn't resign. So hopefully the Clippers can do their part and be competitive. They've had an all right off season. They've lost a few pieces, but then they've also made up for those pieces. So I would definitely say they should be right back in the mix for the next season at least. But who knows what's gonna happen?